Hey guys, this is Faster U4 brought to you by FitLab, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Capital Cycles. If you're a cyclist, you want to go faster? Then let's giddy up. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fast U4. Brought to you by FitLab, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Capital Cycles. Hey, bike racing twice on the weekend. Down in not sunny Dunny. That's right, down in Dunedin for the 2018 New Zealand Masters Games. 2 races, 1 time trial, 1 road race. I won both of them. Let me tell you how I did it and what I learned. Later in the podcast, I also have an interview with an ex-semi-pro rider who also works for FitLab, Scott McDonnell. He gave us a few little insights into the dream versus the reality. Stay tuned, have a little listen to that. All right, so race number 1. New Zealand Masters Games time trial, a 23.8 kilometre out and back Outram here. So if you haven't seen this course, this is a course they use on a relatively regular basis for things like the Otago TT Champs. The road out, headed west here, is kind of hilly-ish. No, it's not. It's kind of rolling, and it's a crappy road, and it's slow. If I look at my data here, it's putting out reasonable power, but only averaging 38 k an hour or so. It's that weird course chip sort of stuff. It's not that nice to ride on, and there was a bit of crap on the road as well, because it had rained and flooded, and none of the flooding was there anymore, but it had left a bunch of silt on there, so that wasn't great. On the way back, a little bit of a tailwind and hitting some more decent speeds. I got some reasonably good aero numbers out of this, and I tested a couple of things. So I was the final rider off from something like 60 riders. Total time 33:26. So I beat the next fastest rider by over 2 minutes. The next fastest rider was not a dude. The next fastest rider was a chick. That's right. Helen Monster Beatty, who I coach, is a time trial specialist of mine down in Dunedin, and she, that's right, beat every single dude. Now, I know it's the Masters Games. I know this is not the absolute prime time. However, there were some guys down there who were genuinely had a lot of flat power, and of course Helen can't supply that sort of gross power, but she does have great aerodynamics and a great style, and that was able to overcome sometimes deficits of 90 to 100 watts for the course to beat guys who are putting out that much more power because of her ability. So congratulations, Helen. That was pretty much a shockingly devastating ride. I think everyone was pretty impressed, including me. Right, 23.8 kilometers, worked 679 kilojoules, so I ripped through 2 and a little bit hamburgers in this time, averaging 42.7 kilometers an hour, just taking the second spot in the all-time on Strava for this course, behind one guy who did about 30 seconds faster than me. Average power 334 watts for an EP of 336. It's 4 watts under my target, which is kind of fine. I didn't feel great on the day, but it was okay. Average heart rate 165 and 88 cadence, right in the sweet spot. You can see from the data here, I'm always looking for my riders, including me. Within 20 to 30 seconds, I want you to have a good hard start. I want you to be up to target speed, and I want you in your position. You can see I hit target speed in 32 seconds, minus a few seconds for the start when I hit the button on my Garmin. And I was in target power, maybe a little late, maybe by about a minute there. So I actually stayed up maybe a little high power longer than I wanted to. That's dangerous. So you go anaerobic for too long, you're not going to be able to hold your FTP really, but I was able to in this case. Power delivery pretty stochastic. There's a couple of little climbs here. And these little climbs, you want to head up into your FTP zone. Just for about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. You can certainly hold that, and on the downside you can have a little bit of recovery, which is my little plan for this course. But on the flat, very low grades, you just want to sit there. What is pretty much your flat FTP? So for me, sitting there about 330, mid 330 watts the whole time. Turn around, if I zoom in here, I want to see a nice turnaround. If I'm in that course, there's a cone in the middle of the road, I want to see you have a turn within about 10 seconds. So it's off the power at 1820, back on the power at 1834. So 14:15. Oh, actually, it's a little less than that. I'm going to say about 13 seconds. So a little, maybe 14. A little bit of a tardy turn. A little bit of a tardy turn from me there. It was tardy too. I remember there's some gravel on the side of the road. I was a bit scared about washing out because I'm a puss. Back on the power and averaging a lot faster on the way back, 48.3 kilometers an hour. And look at that, 333 watts, almost identical power on the return leg. Yeah, if I zoom in here, maybe just hitting up an extra little bit on the way back, averaging, for the last 20 seconds or so, bring it up to the 440 watt mark or so. So that was good enough to win by, as I say, just over 2 minutes. Pretty happy with that ride, tiny bit under target power. The drag coefficient for this ride for me, that's the drag coefficient. It's not your frontal area. Get misled by that. Drag coefficient is how the ear drag applies to you and your bicycle as a whole. It's not exactly the same thing as your frontal area, because even if you have a very low position, very low frontal area, lots of things about you and your bike, your clothing, your setup, your wheels and things that can add to your drag as a whole. One little change I made was on my helmet broke just before the start. The little visor on my Giro Selector helmet broke. The little clip holds it on the helmet. Actually, the clip was fine. It's the visor itself cracked and broke, and it was flopping around. I ripped it off, and I went visorless. Visorless was nice in that actually you get a bit more airflow over your face and things, so it's kind of cooler. The downside is I thought it might be a little draggier because, the visor's not in front of your face. And so it turned out my drag was about 0.25, normally closer to 0.24, 245 with the visor. So a tiny bit more drag without the visor, which you kind of expect, maybe something like 3 to 5 watts or something like that for being visorless. So if we have a quick look at the results here, as I say, there were some guys there who were, they had this thing where there's kind of like big 50-year-old units with these giant calves, and they can just sit on massive power. Good time trialists. So as far as the the results went, as I say, I took out the best issue. That the results are kind of mixed up because there's a lot of age grades. Taking out golds for the men were Peter Grandiak, Fred Blome, Gordon Ashton, Colin Anderson, Gary Clareburt, good time there. Gary Ferguson did a good time as well. Look at that, 35-35. That was pretty good, even after a little turnaround a little penalty for getting the turnaround wrong. Benny Van der Green, 37. No, it wasn't. Ray Dunstan. Ray, nice guy, 35-31. That was another good time. He won his grade. David Lont, 35-56. Carl Haddon winning his grade, 36-45. And me winning my grade and taking the fastest time, 33-25. And the woman winning her grade, 75-79, Carol Evans on 53-59. We had Mary Cullen, 65-69s and 41-37. Jan Brosnahan won her grade in 42. Get rid of that. In 42-29, we had Robin Cameron, 45-48. Julie Savage, by name and by nature, 105. Amanda Church winning her grade, 47-31. Helen Monster Beatty winning her grade, and as I say, taking second fastest time overall. I second only behind her coach, 35.27, and Sarah Saunderson-Walker taking her grade in 41.08. So well done, everyone. So we'll look at the road race. This was a much better day weather-wise, fine and sunny, and I did so well. My coach, Andrew Jamieson, actually commented on my ride. I was amazed. Total moving time 1:21.25, distance of 54.8 kilometers, and there was a mistake. I don't know. There was a lot of misunderstanding around the course. If you're looking at the course on the screen here, you're probably not, but if you are, we started in Henley Community Centre. We headed up kind of northeast, and we're supposed to do a chunk of circuit that came out here, a little more northeast, that added another 10 kilometers onto the circuit or so, maybe 5. That was chopped off, and then we were told we were going to be doing the circuit, which we did do. So that was chopped off. We did a little square circuit here, and then we were told about 5 minutes before the start, no, actually we were doing kind of a longer circuit that came out here closer to the airport and came back along here. None of that happened. We went to this square short circuit, which had the downside of being pretty short. Circuit itself only about 18 to 19 kilometers long. 3 of those, so we did total dist of 54.8, so a little on the short side. That's okay. Average 40.4 kilometers an hour, average power of 295 watts for me with an EP of 334. That's a big diff. It's good power for me on the flat especially, and training load of 108. You can see this is probably the best example I've ever seen of the data showing you what happened in a race. Sometimes you look at a rider's data and you can, of course, see what they've been doing in terms of intervals and that. If someone's been going out and doing a nice training ride, you can see these beautiful, clean intervals. It's great quality. Well, this is a race, and you can see what happened in the race. It's basically a race of thirds here. So the first third, this whole, if you're watching the screen, if you're not, was characterized by pretty low heart rate and very stochastic power delivery, and that was just because in most of the first lap, up until the climb, we were just in a biggish pace line with everyone. We hit the first climb and I lit it up with some pretty strong power there. I think this is very good power for me on this hill. I wanted to light it up to separate the bunch. I did that with a 40-second burst of 709 watts or so. The little climb isn't very big, but it's kind of steepish, and a lot of bigger guys, struggle on that. That left me and 2 other riders to ride away together. So that was, see if I can figure it out from the results here. They've only got kind of nicknames on Strava. See if I can figure out that we had me, we had Mr. Chris Harvey, I think it was, and Paul Goff, who were both very strong riders. Paul was probably a little stronger than Chris, and we lapped it out. You can see in the numbers here, look at this, you can see for a third of the race, this is lapping it out. You can see my power comes up as I take my turn, sitting there in my threshold power on the front, taking turns at 40 to 43 kilometers an hour. Heart rate comes up and then goes down a little bit as I head to the back of the 3 of us for a little period to take another turn. So that's delicious lapping. I put the heat on again on the second time up the climb, just putting in a burst of similar 30-second, 40-second burst of 750 to 800 watts, but we dislodged Chris momentarily, but he scrambled back onto our wheel on the descent. Good for him. And continued to lap out for a while, coming back past the finish line for the last time, it was kind of obvious that Chris Chris was the weaker of the three riders, and Paul was pretty good. And so my kind of thoughts at this stage were that I didn't really want to go into a sprint with either of them because I sprint terribly. So I really needed to try to separate everyone out. So I basically hit it up here. I lit it up down the side with a very marginal crosswind with an effort here, about 777 watts for 10 seconds, just settling back in with the idea that I wanted to dislodge Chris and bring Paul with me, and then try to dislodge him on the final climb maybe. That didn't happen because neither of them got on my wheel, and then there's this weird decision to make when you look around and think, wait, do I want to continue for a third of the race by myself, or do I want to wait for a stronger one to try to bridge to me? Well, these days I'm really much more of a time trialist, and I need to kind of try to use that ability. I decided to be brave and stood on the gas, kept watching behind me to see if any of the riders were going to bridge, but they didn't. And it became pretty obvious most of the way through that lap I'd stay away. I kept it very low-key on the final time up the climb, in fact only averaging about 436 watts up the climb. It's about 20 seconds, 10 seconds slower than we did it on the previous laps, and when I look in the Strava comparison, the other two guys caught up maybe 10 to 15 seconds to me on that one climb alone. Obviously it wasn't enough to close the gap, which was about a minute at that stage, but it's still interesting to see, if you don't keep the pain on, how much guys can come back at you on a little climb like that. So it's good to know if you are actually following and you can't maybe see someone in front of you, just give it the beans on the hill. You never know how much time you're going to make up. Continue to TT myself towards the line there, being cheered on by one Helen Monster Beatty on the corner as I went. So nice of her to come along and marshal, and took out Tay road race. So as far as grades went, we had Plinio Nonato taking out his grade. So I had me taking out mine, Stephen Rhodes taking out actually the grade, what is it, 45 to 49? Is that right? Yeah, it must be. Taking out 50 to 54, Paul Goff. He was the guy who was the second. He was a pretty strong guy. He's a good climber, I could see that. Maybe didn't have much power of me on the flat, but he certainly could climb. Stayed with me, no trouble at all, when I was putting on the beans the first time up the climb. In the 55 to 59, we had Benny Van grinding it out for a gold medal. In the 60 to 64, Colin Horton. In the 65-69, Gary Ferguson. In the 70-74, Colin Anderson. In 75 to 79, Gordon Ashton. In the, look at this, 80 to 84, Fred Blohm. What a savage. Yeah, I mean, if I'm able to ride a bike when I'm that age, I'll be more than happy. So that was a story of the New Zealand Masters Games TT and road race. Tick tick. Happy about that. So next race is the PNP series, summer series, and actually this has kind of taken precedence lately over the Interclub series, which is normally run this time of year. PNP, Port Nicholson Paniki Club in tropical Wellington, has decided to put on a 5-race series. If you go to pnp.org.nz, you'll be able to see it there. Race 1 is the Ocean Beach Challenge. I mentioned it last time, down south through the Wairarapa and back up towards Martinborough. The Gran Fondo and the Medio Fondo. The Medio Fondo just goes around the lake, it's shorter. The Gran Fondo goes right down to the coast over a little climb and then back. Somewhere around about 60 k's for the little and somewhere around about 90 k's for the big. It's a mass start, so Depending on what numbers are like and your strengths, you kind of want to play this a little bit differently from, a handicap or even a graded race in some ways. Probably the number one thing you want to do if you're not one of the top ranked riders here is try to determine who's you can ride with well to get a good placing, who's obviously you can hold, you can stay with and work with well, that is not going to burn you out, either on the climbs or the flats. Even talk to people. And if you can work well with a group, you may even find that you can attack and beat guys later in the race who are fatigued. If you just keep it together, don't burn matches. Try not to go over VO2 too much, VO2 power in this race. Every time you do, you kind of burn a match. Sometimes you got to. As far as this course goes, it's pretty nice and flat going around the lake, the western side of the lake. Heading over, there's a decent climb to the coast and back. And there's probably the least remarked on, but one of the most important parts of the course is coming up back through towards Muttonborough in the final third of the race. There's kind of like a bunch of little rollers. And some of them aren't even really so little. There's one in particular that's pretty chunky. If you're looking at the screen, it's here at about the 48k mark. And you really want to... So it's 48k? Must be more than that. It's the Meteor. They've got the wrong map. 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 No, that's the right map. At about the 48k mark for the Grand Meteor Fondo and about the 68k mark for the Grand Fondos, these chunky rollers, and there will be throwing down happen there, and you do want to be on it, and it will be hard because it's in the very late stages. That's what I'd say about that course. Go to pnp.org.nz and have a look at all the courses. Event 3 is kind of the queen. That is the main freight Rice Mountain Classic. You'll remember in previous years that there's been a race called the Rice Mountain Classic, various guises, but the main point is that it finishes up the Admiral's Hill climb. If you haven't ridden that, it is pretty decent. It's category 2 climb. It's not really in two halves. It's the first majority of it is race pace is something like 20 minutes of very solid, strong FTP climbing, and then there's a very fast downward little dive just before it goes up again at the finish. So don't the finish is kind of a long drag as well. It's like a long uphill. It's not really a false flat. There's certainly nothing false about it. You'll know you're on it, but it's not. That last little drag is kind of like suits a power rider rather than a pure climber. So if you're a bigger guy, you may be falling off a bit on the steepest part of the climb. Don't freak out. Get aero, get down in the drops, hunt down any of these little skinny units who've gone off the front ahead of you in that final, 2 or 3 Ks. See if you can hunt them down and eat them up just before the finish line. You never know if those guys have really gone deep. There's a good chance you can actually pull them back, TT up to them, and demool on them in the final. That's what I'd say about that. All right, go to the website, have a little look at all of the races there. There's not that many entries yet, less than 30 entries so far, with only a few days to go. I'd encourage anyone to have a little look at that. Looks fun. I don't know about the price. It's $60 to enter, and it's $100 for a team. And it seems a little pricey to me, but if they're good events, I'm happy to pay. So we'll hold judgment to see what the quality of the events is like. I'm sure they'll be great. All right, guys. Here's part 2 of this podcast. This is my interview today with Scott McDonnell, ex-pro riding in Europe, and current racer, coach, and tester with FitLab in Christchurch.
I was probably just like a lot of inspiring young cyclists, wanting to race in Europe. And I did an electrical apprenticeship. And the day I finished that, I was on the plane the next day to Belgium. and I spent a season there doing the kermesse circuits, where you are not in a team. You just look up the paper and look what races are on. You go to the races and you try and win money.
Why didn't you just look on the internet what races were on, dummy?
Yeah, it wasn't a thing called the internet then. It was in the newspaper. So,
oh
yeah.
my God. How did you figure out what was going on? Because it would have been in Flemish, right?
Yeah, you just had to learn the lingo, and often, I was staying in a flat, and in that flat there was guys from England, Australia, Americans, and so everyone helped each other figure out stuff. So we did that, and so you'd know what races are, and some races you could go to, and there'd be 200, 250 riders, and sometimes there'd be 50 riders. But the aim was always to get it, top 20, so you get some money, which would pay for the rent and food the next day.
Wait, quickly describe what a kermesse is.
Okay, a kermesse is generally like a small 5 to 12 kilometre tight circuit, not a criterium. It's just a tight circuit with lots of corners in it. Going through a village, which often hosts the race, and there's often sprint primes every lap. And they're pretty fast and furious, and normally sort of 100 to 150 k's.
So it's like a really long, painful criterium.
Yeah, the effort goes on from the start, and most of the Belgians there think they're the next Eddie Merckx, and so they're attacking crazily from the start, and it just doesn't ease off till the end.
Well, this sounds delightful so far. How many of these would you do a week?
Depends how buggered you were. Normally three, maybe 4. Depends on how much you needed the money. Sometimes for rent, or how much food you needed in the cupboards.
How much money could you win?
Well, that's going back a wee while. I'd say if you got 20th, you might get $50. Back then, I don't know, have any idea. This is way back in 1995, so as you can do your math, it's a long time ago.
So $20, 1995. So, about $28 then. That's. I mean, even if you're surviving on ramen noodles, that's not great, Scotty.
No, it's not super duper, but the race only cost you 50 cents back then.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it wasn't like a New Zealand event where it cost you 20 or $30 to do it. It was 50 cents, and there was preems along the way, so you could actually win 5 preems, and they were quite good money because the villagers would put the money up, and you could get quite a good bit of money, and you didn't even need to finish the race to get that money.
Mm-hmm. So you can attack off the gun almost, or do some suicide move to try to pick up some of these preems.
Yeah.
And then asphyxiate in your own blood, vomit, and piss on the side of the road. So
yep.
Good times.
So,
what other races did you do?
And I did the amateur Paris-Roubaix, so that is the same as the professional one, except didn't go through the Arenberg Forest. And you have the same level, like back then there was Super U, Garn, all the amateur level slash the guys that had won all the races previously were like Marc Madio, Laurent Fignon, Stephen Roach, all past winners. If you won that race, then you got to go into the proper pro ranks.
Sweet Jesus Christ. What team were you on?
I was actually on a New Zealand team.
What was it? Who was it sponsored by? Sports, the Department of Sport Communism. What was it? What was the?
No, it was just basically they loved having national teams there, and so there was enough Kiwis over there at the time to have a invitation, a national team, and they would pay for your start and all that kind of thing, and you got quite well looked after because you were like a national team for this particular thing when I was racing in Belgium. So yeah.
Did you get paid?
No, we didn't get paid to start, but they pay for everything else, like all your transport. They provide you a team car or 2 team cars. Yeah, it was pretty good going, really.
Was there any massage, and how hot were they?
No, that's not the reality it was over there at the time.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I've got some questions that I'd like to ask. That I'm sure that being a weekend warrior type racer here in New Zealand that I know. I think it's probably fair to say I haven't experienced exactly the same level of pro racing as you, but I think I've got a pretty good notion in my mind about what it's all about. So based on that, I'd just like you to maybe just hear what I have to say on this. I'm going to make some announcements about what I think it's all like, and maybe you can tell me how correct I am. The first one's about accommodation. Now, I think it's only fair to say that there's no doubt that you would be, might be. I'm not saying you're staying at the Ritz-Carlton, but on a day-to-day basis, you would be put up at a low to middling level kind of a, 150 to 200 euro a night type of hotel complex, reasonable village somewhere, good, reasonable mid-range restaurants for dinner, and massage 8:30, 9 p.m. before turning in on your double bed in the room, which you don't have to share with anyone. So that would be fairly accurate. Is that right?
Oh, you're so close, but so far away. So generally, you might get with, maybe the best scenario would be with one other rider in a room, more like 4. So the plunk you it with 4 of you. Accommodation would be going from maybe an okay hotel to like in someone's basement, because a friend would let you stay there. You'd always pray that you would get some nice teammate to have the room with. Otherwise, you get the snorers. Which
God.
So some people bring in the curtains. So
that sounds like gay slang. What was that?
That's that's like the curtains are getting sucked in because they're snoring so damn loud.
You're right. Any farting?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Who was the worst farter? Do you remember? What nationality has the worst gas?
I'd say the Belgians.
Yeah, I was picking the Belgians. Yeah. I'm thinking that the what do you think it is about the Belgians that makes it so?
I don't know. They're a pretty tough culture. Yeah, there's no mucking around. They're hard. They're just hard.
Quite a lot. So I've got a sister-in-law who's Belgian, and I realise that doesn't make me related, but I think in some ways that makes me the tough individual that I've become. Tough and
all over there.
There's some epigenetic factor happening there. I think that's accurate. The second point is I'd like to discuss. I sort of touched on is food, and I think it's I have this notion where you might not go downstairs to the banquet hall right on 6, sometimes 6:15 they may be very slack and have everything served in front of you, the team staff, the riders at 6:30, and the quality of the food might not be top notch, but there would be good quantities. It would be a lot of, you would select from 6 to 7 options off the menu, and a mid-range sort of wine selection. Where am I at on that? Where am I on the ball? Am I at bullseye or just slightly off?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. If you were doing the top, UCI teams, the pro teams, that's most likely that would be the scenario. But then you have the different tiers of professional cycling teams going, down the line, and I was down the bottom of the line. So when I was racing it for a Swiss team, and one morning I remember waking up and told to hurry up, pack your bags, we were going to the next race. So we got up, drove for 2 hours, and then we stopped at a cafe and got coffee, and I thought, oh, this is all good. And some bread, like the long sticks of bread, and I started having that. And then I sort of asked in my Swiss German, we were going to go for breakfast, and they told me, well, this is breakfast. coffee and bread.
Mm.
So I started stuffing myself down with all that as much as I could, because we drove another 2 hours and then we were on for the race. It was all on. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
So
Bread and coffee was
carbohydrate was covered, and caffeine, but not a lot else, Scotty.
protein in the milk maybe from the coffee.
Yeah, I suppose a little bit. How old were you at this stage?
I was 22, 23.
Mm-hmm. Did you miss Mum's cooking?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the hardest things for, a lot of young cyclists that go to Europe. You get quite isolated, not just with the language, but back then there wasn't internet, so you couldn't just Skype or email or FaceTime someone. You were very isolated by yourself. So
How did you find hookers in the villages that you were in then?
yeah, that would cost probably a lot of money.
Last but not least is something we've touched on a little bit, is the bikes and the kit. And my expectations would be that you would be supplied a good level, a bike, training bike, race bike, time trial bike, probably a backup race bike, probably a backup training bike, and so on. And these would be presumably, full Dura Ace, Campag record, no SRAM in those days, of course. They would be cleaned at the end of each training ride by a professional mechanic who would do a full clean down, relube and replace any equipment that needed doing. And your full drivetrain would be replaced on a weekly to fortnightly basis to be reasonable. So where am I? Am I in the bullseye, or again, just on the 20? Where am I?
Yeah, I think you're missing the board, actually. Totally missing the board. And from my experience, we got one bike and one set of race wheels, and just pretty much you had to look after it yourself. Even to the point sometimes that you would have to go buy equipment yourself to make sure that it was all working well. So, yeah. One thing is, you definitely had a pair of good race wheels. That was always the good thing, but anything else other than that, most of the time you had to look after yourself. If you were on a proper tour, then that was a wee bit different. There would be a mechanic that would be tinkering with it at the end of the day and start of the day. But other than that, it was pretty much, you had to look after it yourself.
Thanks for watching/listening to Faster You Fall, brought to you by FitLab, Capital Cycles, Tailwind Nutrition and Biomaxa. If you'd like to get in touch for a coaching program or testing, you can get hold of me, steve@fitlab.co.nz, or go to fitlab.co.nz. Talk soon, guys.